Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor podcast. Devon Taylor, Devon Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Devon Taylor podcast, where we have guests from all around the world tell their unique and powerful stories to not only allow their voice to be heard, but for you to leave feeling inspired. Today's guest has stood on some of the world's most influential stages, from the G20 summit to the United Nations, bringing complex issues like early childhood nutrition, literacy, and sustainable development into clear human terms. She's worked in communities in nearly every corner of the globe, guided grassroots projects that preserve dignity and foster trust, and mentored countless aspiring humanitarians. Her philosophy is simple but transformative. True service starts small, respects culture, and builds solutions that last. And while her work has reached across faiths, borders, and languages, her heart remains rooted in the belief that we all have the power to make a difference right where we are. I'd love to welcome to the show Sharon Eubank. Hello.
Hello, Devon. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I'm super grateful because I know you have served communities all of the world. So this is so special for me. So I really want to start. Is there a moment or experience that has shaped how you see the purpose of humanitarian work?
It's a good question. You know, everybody has transformative experiences, and that's one of the great things about your podcast is you're trying to transform things through storytelling, which is great. I'm originally from Redding, California, but I live in Salt Lake City now, and my day job, as you said, is I'm this global director. And I've spent a lot of time, 27 years, going to some of the hardest places in the world. But I had an experience in 2005 that kind of changed the way that I look at work and actually what I think is powerful. So I had gone to Sri Lanka after the Southeast Asia tsunami. And if you remember that tsunami, it hit so many people and so many countries, and 300,000 people were killed. And lots of damage had happened in Sri Lanka where I was. And we were there, I was there to help fishermen get their boats back and seamstresses to get their machinery back. And we were building 1,000 homes. But there was a Sri Lankan guy named Shanta who was driving me. We were in a van, and he said, I want to show you something as we were driving from a different place. And we stopped along some railroad tracks where there's a daily train that goes by there. And when the people heard the siren, the warning about the wave coming, they looked around and they thought, oh, that train track is high. It's kind of based up, and the train was there. So they handed up toddlers and little children up into the people who were in the train, and they handed them up through the windows. And then they thought that they would be safe up there. But the wave was so much bigger than anybody thought. And so when it slammed into the train, it just tumbled the train 5 times. It just tumbled. And so 1,500 people lost their lives inside the train. And it was just so sad. This is 5 months later. And there's all these families camped around this train wreckage that's there. And, we got out of the car and people came right up to me. I know I stand out as this pink white face, and they were touching my arms, and they're saying the little English words that they know of, I lost my baby, please help me, I lost my husband. And I didn't have anything in my pockets. Sometimes I keep, little things that I can give kids, but I just didn't have anything. And I felt so hopeless. I couldn't tell them about what I was doing. I didn't speak the language that they spoke. The houses that we were building were far enough away that what was that to them? Who cares? But Shanta went over to our van and he gets a little soccer ball out and he pumps it up and he starts kicking it around with the kids. And, the kids are, they're showing off their tricks and they're doing fun, and Shanta's pretty good. And I could see that, people were starting to relax. And then a woman came up and she said, hey, I tried that yeast that you brought me, and here's the bread. You should try this. So he took a little bite. And another woman said, I can't find any washing powder. Can you help me get some? And he said, I'll bring some next time I come. And as I was standing there in the dirt, just watching this whole thing, I realized it doesn't matter that you're from, this big NGO. It doesn't matter that you're doing these other projects. Shanta is more powerful in this situation because he lives here, because he speaks the language, because he understands the culture. We're more powerful in the place where we're from. It sounds stupid, but I had never understood that before. It was the first time that really came home to me. every one of us is more powerful right where we live for those
Mm.
very ordinary reasons.
I love that. And it's often hard to really understand that, like you just said, because in the community that I'm in, and this is probably not even a great example, but the community that I'm in, they're so centered on one sport and one sport specifically for the youth. And for me personally, I've grown up in communities where all different sports were offered and gave kids just a limitless options to really kind of find themselves. And so for me personally, like trying to implement something different into the community that I'm in, just to give kids an opportunity to choose, has been really big for me. But just hearing what you're saying, just on a grander scale, it just it makes such a difference when you're from that area. You understand the need, and then you can kind of fill that in. Um, what
And your
first?
and your
I,
community is gonna be different because of that you bringing in that new sport. It
yeah.
wouldn't happen without you, and you're doing it.
Thank you. Yeah, and it feels great to be able to offer that, and you really never have that perspective until you're in that situation. You're like, "Wow, I can bring something and add value." And I feel like there's so many ways that we as people can do that, and not just with sports, but in so many different ways. But what first drew you to the field of humanitarianism, and how did you know it was your life's work?
It didn't start out as my life's work. I've done a bunch of different things. I can remember when the Yugoslavia war was going on, this would have been the '90s. I came home one day and my mom she's knitting slippers. She's knitting these red pair of slippers. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, there's this airlift for these supplies and they're gonna go to the Yugoslavians." And all those pictures were on the news. They were so, tragic, people being driven out of their homes and separated, and so many people had been killed. And I remember thinking, Mom, little pair of red slippers, that's not gonna do anything. Is that the best we can do in this terrible thing that's going on? Never knowing that, I would work in humanitarian aid. But later on, after I was working in the humanitarian sector, I read a story in the New York Times about a woman from the Yugoslavian conflict, and she said they were so dehumanized. They were living in, they every freezing cold, no utilities, living in bombed out buildings just in cement, and how cold they were. And she said we didn't feel like we were human, and nobody cared about us. And somebody came and they passed out knitted socks, and she said the fact that somebody gave me a new pair of socks and it was just for me, it made me feel human again. And I realized it isn't that my mom was doing this paltry little thing. It's just that you've got to send the right thing at the right time in the right way. That's what really makes the difference. And
Wow.
and so kind of following that mantra in my career has helped me.
That's beautiful. So would you say like your mom was a huge inspiration for you growing up?
She absolutely was in this and so many other ways.
It's so beautiful. I love that. My mom inspired me a lot too, so I resonate with that a ton. But you've worked on both the global stage and local grassroots projects. How do you find the balance between both of those worlds?
I'm not trying to say that there isn't a place for, big, large organizations because things have to be done at scale and you have to work with governments and those things. But I really think there's this vast untapped power of individuals in their own communities that we sometimes we look at something on the news or we just feel helpless. I can't do that. My community, feels differently than I do my politics or my faith. And so we just sort of stay out of it. And to me, although all of those things are being balanced across the world, that's the thing that I wanna put my energy into. We can do so much more than what we're doing, and it isn't hard, and it doesn't require a ton of money, it just takes us. It takes our characters and our energy, and I think there's a lot of things that can be done.
And I think a lot of people will stop at that idea that it takes money or it takes a lot of people when in reality, if you're willing to put yourself out there in certain ways, you can definitely help the community. Um, but you wrote a book. I kind of wanted to get into that because I was able to read some of it and I loved it because it instantly brought me into kind of where I found myself finding a lot of peace, which was just like guiding principles. So you wrote a book called Doing Small Things with Great Love. You outlined 12 principles for ethical and sustainable service. Which of these principles do you find people struggle with the most and why?
I really wrote the book because for 27 years, we've made terrible mistakes and we tried to learn from our mistakes. And I don't want people to have to wait 27 years, to do those things. I think one of the most powerful principles is that it's I call it in the book local solutions for local problems. And part of the reason that we make this mistake over and over again is because of the stories that we tell on the news. When something happens, people want to send things. That's how we express our empathy. And so we gather things and we ship them. But I tell the story in the book, it just has these inadvertent consequences that are just so sad. I told about when Sandy Hook happened in Newtown. And, everybody heard about it and we're just facing, similar situations now. But the way that they responded was they mailed teddy bears. And that little town of 27,000 people got 65,000 teddy bears, and 1,000 of them were life-size. And so they had to do stuff. They were coming in the mail every single day. So they rented a warehouse, 80,000 square feet, and it stacked 8 feet high, the entire thing. They had to get other people from the postal services in other towns to just sort of handle the things. And people were trying to express, empathy, but it wasn't the right time. So instead of dealing with the emotional trauma of what had happened there, they were trying to deal with all this stuff. And it's it's not a slam against the people who wanted to do that thing. It just wasn't the right thing. And so one of the great things that I think we can learn that idea in the book is ask people what they want before we decide I'm going to pick this thing that I think you want. We should ask people, what is it you want? And when do you want it to come? And what can I do that will be the most help to you? And the problems come when we assume, those kinds of things. So I've seen terrible stories of giant loads that have been come by plane and they just, in the end, they just rot on a beach or, they have to cart it off to the dump because it's been rotted in the sun and they're just so tragic. And that's not what we meant. But I think we can learn from some of these principles so that we don't repeat some of those things.
Absolutely. I loved, or at least there was one principle that really stuck out to me, and I was like, "Oh, I really want to ask, for her to unpack this for us." So the principle was, "My solution to your problem will always be wrong,"
Mm.
and I just wanted you to kind of unpack that for us and kind of what it meant in practice.
I was a brand new director and I was pretty young, so a lot of people thought, "Why did they hire her?" And there was a guy that worked with me, he was a colleague named Patrick, and Patrick could do my job in his sleep, I know that he could. And every morning he would come into my office, he'd been doing this for 37 years, and he'd sit down with me for like 20 minutes, and we'd kind of review the day. What do you think is gonna happen? What do you wanna do about that? And we'd just go through things. And I'd turn to him and I'd say, "Patrick, what do you think I should do?" Because he had lots of experience. And he would say, this was his mantra, "My solution to your problem will always be wrong. What do you think you should do?" And I was frustrated in the beginning, "Patrick, you've been here, tell me what you think I should do." But he knew that by telling me, I would just make me dependent on him. And I wouldn't ever trust myself and my own instincts. So instead, he resisted that temptation and he allowed me to say, "Here's what I think." And he would ask me a bunch of questions about, well, what would happen if we did that? And what will you do if this happens? And he helped me think it through. That was the most valuable career experience that I had in all of them. Just that ability to say, "My solution to your problem will always be wrong. What do you think you should do?" Give people the respect and the confidence to be able to because the answers are inside them. They know what to do. And if they don't, they'll ask a question and you can help find some resources. But let them be the lead and don't you just come in and take over.
I love that, and it's funny when you say that because it's almost like he was, giving you the ability to trust yourself, you know what I mean? And that's powerful. I mean, did you guys always have that type of relationship, or was that something that was like, grown over time, obviously, for him to say, trust yourself with this?
I think it's a skill that he learned well before I came along. Because, he in the very beginning, he just became that kind of a counselor for me. In my later career, I tried to be that counselor for other people because in a humanitarian situation or in a situation with your kids or when you're sitting, talking to a neighbor who has a problem, we think we're gonna jump in. "Oh, I've got the best idea. I'll tell you what you think you should do," or, I'm educated," or "I'm from America," or, "I have money," or whatever the thing is. But the truth is The solution is inside them, and all you can do is excavate it by asking questions. And Patrick taught me how to do that.
That's beautiful. You also highlight sustainability with the question, what happens when the problem comes up next time? How do you approach building lasting change rather than quick fixes?
Everybody knows this because we have to do it in different parts of our lives. You have to, when you're trying to solve a problem, you have to think through the entire thing. And one of those things is when this thing breaks, what am I going to do then? Or when the batteries run out, or when it runs out of gas, all these things. So in the book, I tell the story about we were working on a water project in Kenya, and we thought we're going to be so sustainable. We're going to use solar panels. So we built these big solar panels, and you don't have to have a big noisy generator. You won't need gasoline. And we were really proud of ourselves. And so we inaugurate the well, the whole community comes out, and they're all excited. And it great for 2 weeks. And then a hailstorm came on, and it just broke out all the solar panels.
Oh,
So the guy comes and he says, how do I repair these? Where do I go to get, the repair for the solar panels? And we realized, oh, it's in Germany. We bought those solar panels in Germany, and there's no way that this village in Kenya can get those. So we didn't think through that problem of what happens for the life cycle of these things. And that was a really powerful lesson to me of when the need comes up again, what will this community do? Who understands how to repair it? Will it be affordable? Is it available locally? All of those kinds of questions are part of sustainability. And sometimes we get so excited about the original thing of you're going to have clean water that we forget those other answers.
that's oh man. I mean, it's same concept when someone buys a house. When you don't realize how much comes with upkeeping a house, and you're responsible for the toilet if it goes bad, or the sink if it gets clogged, or anything like that. And as someone that bought a house recently, I'm
You know exactly.
realizing, yeah, realizing what I'm, what I'd signed myself up for. But yeah, that's great advice. If someone is just starting out in volunteer work, is there a specific principle you'd recommend that they should master
Yeah,
first?
that's such a good question. I just wonder, since you're working in your community on the sports thing, how would you answer that? What would your answer be?
Oh man. If I were to, for me personally, it was just contacting the city, getting in connection with the recreation department, seeing what they offered and how I could fill in that void. For me, I coach volleyball, so I went directly, saw that they offered basketball to all of the kids, and noticed that there was not really much for the girls. And volleyball is the number one sport for girls in the U.S. And I did not see why they didn't have a program. And so I, bugged them and bugged them and bugged them until finally I got a call, and one of the leaders had asked me to do a class. And so I did the class for the summer, and all of the parents, would come up to me and ask me, "What's next? What's next?" And for the first 2 years, I would just say, "I don't know. It's kind of up to the city." And after I had talked to the city for so many times, I finally said, you know what? Because the city wasn't really taking any action, I decided to go around the city and find another avenue where I could help bridge the gap between just a small clinic to actually having the kids participate in an organized, I guess, like more of a play situation for them, so they could be on a team and get jerseys and get that feel and understand that the sport has levels, and the sooner you start, the easier it becomes for you down the road. And now we're going to start our first, we're calling it the clinic festival, where the kids will get an opportunity to join a team, play on a team, get jerseys, and have practices, and the parents will step in. And it all started from just me reaching out to start that small clinic. So I would say, just to go back to the point, make sure that you're reaching out to the avenues that you may need to reach out to in the sectors that will help you make the difference that you're looking to make. So hopefully.
You just taught a masterclass.
Yeah. I'm like, hopefully that's the right answer. But for me, that worked. You know what I mean? And I commend everything that you're doing, because you're just doing it on a grander scale. And, it makes, when I'm hearing stories about, like yours, it makes me feel called to do so much more. And I guess a part of it is just raising the awareness like we're doing right now. But Yeah.
When people ask me what can they do, how do I practically start? I always give them two suggestions and then you follow them. I said, go to your mayor, your city council, or, whoever's running the sports program and ask them, tell me about the whole issue. What's going on in our city? How come you only do basketball? And ask them all those questions and then say, how about volleyball? I have this idea and and really enter into a dialogue. And most people think, I'm not going to approach the mayor. They actually welcome it. They almost always are glad when citizens are interested. If you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
wanna do your mayor, go to your principal of your school, the junior high or the elementary school, and just say, "Look, I live here. What do you need? What's going on? What can we do to help at the school?" You'll get ideas out of that.
Yeah, it's been I've noticed that people tend to support, when they see that you're trying to make a difference, and yeah, I think that's great advice, so thank you.
You know, what often happens, though, is we get so earnest about the cause that we care about that we forget that people do things because they're fun. And that's one of the principles I write about in the book. It's supposed to be fun, and if we take the fun out of it, we make it just into a chore about volunteering or trying to help people, I don't know, you can do it a little way, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah,
And I think you chose one of the things that people gravitate around. We love sports.
yeah,
Sports is a bonding activity because you can be all different kinds of people, but you can get together and play your game, wear the jerseys, and it's good for the community. It's good for the girls. It's and it's they do it because it's fun.
mhm,
And there's other things that are fun. Food is a great gatherer. I tell a story in the book about my friend Gustavo. I mean, he's from Guatemala, so he's bringing the salsa to every single event and the Guatemalan hot chocolate, and he's sponsoring contests, which he always wins. But people loved being around him. He was just so fun, and we respond to those kinds of things. I think music is another one, and getting involved in your community is another one. So the more we can do to make it fun, it attracts people, and people want to be there. We just need the Gustavos to bring the salsa.
right. I wanted to ask too about your book. What was your favorite part about writing the book? Because obviously you're giving a lot of information, and I when I wrote my book, it felt like there was a lot of soul searching that happened. So I kind of wanted to get your perspective. How was that experience for you?
Nobody's ever asked me that question. It's a great question.
Thank you.
I ride a lot of airplanes, and I was on an airplane, and I was, just looking for something to watch, and there was a documentary about Jimmy Carter. And I watched it 3 times in the plane because there's this story in it where he realizes because of the Iran hostage situation and the high inflation and the gas lines, this is 1980, he realizes he's gonna lose the election, he's not gonna get, reelected. And something kinda happens to him. He's gonna give a big speech about energy, and he cancels the whole thing. And then he says, "I'm gonna just tell you something that's a little bit hard that nobody would ever tell you before, but I'm gonna tell you the truth." And he gives this great talk, and I quote part of it in the book. But he says this line, he says, "The common good is our common interest and our individual responsibility." And that kind of flies in the face of the culture that we've got going right now. This is kind of all, what's good for me. I'm gonna do what's best for me. But this idea that the common good is our individual responsibility, I really resonated to that. And it's kind of the whole point of why we do voluntary service or humanitarian work, or because we're trying to make our communities better. And in this time where everybody's polarized, you're not like me, I'm gonna cancel you. You're not my tribe, my faith, my sport, my, whatever, politics. And we get put in these little tiny boxes where we can't talk to anybody. And I just think that there's such a shame about that. We need each other, and we need each other different. And it's okay to disagree with each other. And it's okay if I say, Devon, I disagree with you 75% of the time, but I still like you. You're still my friend. And I think we need to cultivate those skills. And Jimmy Carter inspired me about that. So that was really important to me when I worked on.
I love that. Yeah, and I feel that books truly help you see the world in such a different perspective than maybe you would have when you started it, and um, I'm grateful that you wrote it, because now people will be able to kind of get to not only know you, but get to know themselves as they read it and really ask themselves questions that they probably never would have asked before, reading the book. Um, so as you've gone through, working with a lot of different areas and a lot of different people, What is one misconception people often have about humanitarian work?
I'm a person of faith, and I often think about Jesus. He had the whole world to teach his gospel to, and he never went anywhere. You know, he walked up and down 122 miles and he walked around, he talked to people. He never spoke a different language than other people. He didn't have a big pot of money. And I think to me, that's the biggest misconception. We feel like we have to have a fund or we have to have an organization. And there is a tremendous amount of good that gets done just by people walking around and trying to be good, trying to be kind to one another, trying to look at a problem and say, I can do something about that. And you're living that in your life. I'm trying to live it in mine. And I think lots of people want to do it. They sometimes just don't know how to start. So in the back of the book, I just wrote 50 things. Here's a place to start. You can do this anytime, any day, but you don't need a fund. You don't need employees. There's so much that we can just do just by being who we are. That's maybe the
Mm,
biggest misconception.
I love that. And I love that you said that. People, please go pick up the book. We're going to leave all of the information in the show notes, but I just, like I said, I love that you sent it to me and I was able to get, my moment with it. So thank you for that. But yeah, just
And the
giving people options. Go
and
ahead.
the title comes from a Mother Teresa quote that says, yeah, doing small things with great love. She said, we can't all do big things, but we can do small things with great love. So when you know it comes from Mother Teresa and not Sharon Eubank, it makes it more special. So
Yeah. I love that. So, I mean, in this work too, I mean, obviously you're seeing a lot of different things. You're seeing, a lot of different struggles. How are you personally managing the emotional weight of working in areas with deep suffering or crises?
I think all of us feel stress. We feel it in a lot of ways. We live in stressful times, and there's just a lot of things going on, and they can weigh us down. And I think one of the results of that is we kind of feel paralyzed, or we kind of will want to withdraw. I don't want to be part of this, and so it's easy to withdraw. One of the things I told this a little bit in the book, but it's one of the great lodestones of my life. Is the scriptures talk about we got to multiply and replenish, and we think that's about having kids, and it's probably about having kids, but it's also this idea that I'm going to give out, and then I've got to replenish myself, and it's not indulgent. It's not, you know, how dare she? It's a commandment. In order for you to give out, you have to replenish. So I need to know what the things are that replenish me. And for me, it's nature, it's my family, it's my faith, it's doing things that, are important to me. And I'm not any different than anybody else. We're all like that. But for us to be able to give out and then replenish. But the great thing that I want to say is just take somebody with you. If you're out, enjoying the nature that you love, just take somebody with you, share it with somebody, and that makes it not so that it's selfish, it's more of the replenishing, and that's how I have gotten through 27 years of some hard things and some good
Oh, I
things.
hear. I love that too because it's funny. I don't even think about it, but I'll naturally take my kids with me um, on those nature trips. Or the other day we went to dinner and we had to wait a little bit, so I took them into the mall and we just walked around.
There's something
That's what I
great
did.
about that.
Right. That's what I did as a kid. I remember just walking around the mall and looking, not necessarily going in and buying anything, but just, kind of just taking it all in. So,
And that's not about the mall, it's about you and your kids.
hmm
It's about them spending time with you.
yeah, I love that. Have there been any moments and that you've doubted the impact of your work or um, anything that you're doing? And if so, how did you move forward from that?
Humanitarian work is messy work, and there's always conflict, that erupts in it. And so you feel like it's hard not to feel like, oh, the work of 10 years just went down the drain because we've been working in a place. And I think that's true just in the neighborhoods where we live. And there's a lot of, I mean, I hate to say this, but my HOA is one of the most conflicted places that I've ever worked because neighbors and we all live right by each other, but we have such strong opinions about things. And sometimes it's easy to feel like, "Ugh, what is the use?" It gets destroyed anyway, but I I've learned over a long period of time that there are things we can do. We should do the things that we know we can do. There's some things we can soften. We can't fix it. Mother Teresa's a good example. She cannot stop that person from dying, but she can wash their feet. She can tuck them in bed. She can sit by them and be with them while they go. So that just that sharing the hard things of people. And then as sad as it is, at the end of that spectrum, there's just things we can't do anything about. We can't change them. I wish I could change so many things, but I can't. And so I have to accept that and trust in the higher good that things will work out as good people try and use faith. And for me, I'll pray, God, I cannot fix this. I cannot do anything about it. This one, I'm going to I'm going to ask for your help and trust in some of those higher powers. And that's how it makes it for me.
I love that. And I pray a lot too, and I like to say I give it to God um, when I can't figure it out or when it feels really tough for me. Um, but I love that you brought up your faith because I feel like it's such a strong part of who you are, and and how you just how you're helping the world. But you've worked across different faiths and traditions and cultures. How do you approach building the trust in the communities different from your own?
One of the things that is so meaningful to me is that the golden rule exists in almost all major faiths. And so I listed those in the preface of the book because it's one thing that we all have in common. Do unto other people what you would want done back to you. And as many different faiths as that is expressed, we have that in common. And I think that you can build civilization on that. I love working with other people of faith because they care. They're motivated by their values and what's important to them. And when we can connect on a value that we both feel strongly about, we can do things together. And I don't ever want faith to be a barrier. I know that I can find things in common with other people. And it enriches my life and my faith when I get to know theirs. So I'm always looking for those opportunities.
I think that's one of the things that really called to me about interviewing you was that belief alone. You remind me of a really good friend of mine named Tyler, who's strong in her faith, but also super. I don't know if understanding is the right word, but understanding of others and what they might have gone through, and kind of building that bridge. I just wanted to say that, like, I'm super grateful to have you here and for you to be an example of someone strong in their faith, but also someone that can be, very nurturing to others that may not share the same beliefs as you, because it's a big world, and, everyone is, raised in different communities and, gone through different things. So I'm really proud to have you here because I just feel you exemplify a lot of what I believe in. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, we have that in common. And if we can build more bridges, let's do that.
hmm What role do you believe volunteerism plays in building peace and understanding between different groups?
John Huco is the CEO of Rotary International. Everybody knows Rotary because, Rotary clubs and they sponsor service and everything. But he was giving a speech in Australia and he said something that I had to just write down immediately. He said, let us be peacemakers so that we can wage peace as aggressively as nations wage war. And I think volunteerism, if you just want to call it something else, it's peacemaking. It's doing just what we were talking about. It's finding people who are so different from us and finding things we have in common and then working on something. Let's pick a project. Let's do something. Uh, in my neighborhood, the local mosque was getting ready to celebrate Ramadan, and the ladies in my church went to the ladies in the mosque and they said, "Let's do something together." So we
We
stood
stood
for a
for a
couple hours
couple.
and put hygiene kits together. And I didn't know them very well. They didn't know me very well, but we're talking about our kids in the park and the sports that people play and what Ramadan fasting means to them and what fasting means to me. We had the best time. And
Mm,
we need more opportunities like that. And that creates peace because then when something tough comes along in our community, now I have friends over at that mosque that I didn't have before. And we can build a little bit on each other's understanding. If we don't know those things, we're suspicious, we're afraid, we jump to the wrong conclusions, and it makes the conflict worse. So that idea that volunteerism is a tool for peace, I think is really
I
important.
believe that too. And I feel, just like I said, the work that you're doing is just amazing, and how you're trying to touch other communities and help. It just makes me really grateful to be able to share your story, share your book, and bring it to my audience. And like I said, audience, if you're listening, please, please, please check out the book. I think it'll really help you find the answer for your next right step if you're looking to volunteer in any way. Um, But I just have, a few more questions before I let you go. If you could see one shift in how the world approaches humanitarian service over the next decade, what would it be?
I've thought a lot about that question. I think if we could shift one thing, money is important. You have to have money. And we spend a lot of time fundraising and, tracking the money and doing all that. But the money isn't what ensures that things work out. And so then you ask, well, what is the thing that ensures that it works out? And it's that the money percolates through a trusted network. And that network can really be anything, but it's people who have agreed, I'm going to hold each other accountable. As this money flows through us, it's not going to go corrupt. It's not going to line our pockets. It's not going to, get wasted. We care enough about this that we're going to make sure. We put all the emphasis in the humanitarian sector too much on the money. And the real effort it's that protective network, because once that network realizes, hey, we can use these resources and we can get something done, they can do that over and over and over again. And so if I could transform one thing, it would be to shift the emphasis from how much money do we need to how do we make that network trust each other and avoid corruption and be that percolating factor so that the money, when it flows through it, actually makes the difference that it should need. We should care more about those little networks. And they're not big things. They're extended families, they're church groups, they're PTSAs, they're little water committees. They're those little groups of people who know each other. That's where the transformation, I think, should be.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Before I let you go, though, I did want to ask. I know you kind of said it in your book, and we talked a little bit about it, but just to leave the listeners with something so that they're not feeling defeated by the idea of trying to volunteer. For listeners that want to make a difference but feel overwhelmed by the scale of global challenges, where do you think they should start?
Please start just like Shanta in your own community. And in chapter 6 in the book, I talk about there's an app called Just Serve. You can call up Just Serve, you can put in your zip code, and it will bring up all these opportunities for you to do right wherever you live. And I would just try and go do those. You'll be surprised at what's in there. You'll think, oh, I didn't know about this. So I would just ask people to give it a try.
Thank you so much for that. And just before I let you go, where can anyone find you? Order the book. We're going to leave all this information in the show notes, but before we go, I'd like you just let us know.
The book's available on Amazon. You can just search by the title, Doing Small Things with Great Love. It's also available at deseretbook.com. And you can reach me on Instagram at Sharon Eubank _
Perfect. Thank you again, Sharon, for being here. I appreciate you so much and your story and all the work that you are doing. And I just hope you continue to make an impact and people continue to support your work. If there's anything we can do here, we would love to support you because, like I said, I feel there's so much similarity in what you're trying to do and what I'm trying to accomplish. So I appreciate you from the depths of my heart. So
It's
thank
my
you.
pleasure to get to know you even better, and you've been so great. Thank you, Devon. I'll talk to you again.
All righty. Until next time, guys.
Hey guys, it's Icarus here.
And Amelia.
And I'm here to tell you if you'd like to join our brand new adventure. Go to DevonTaylorAuthor.com to learn more.
And check out the cool items like the new bucket hat.
Yeah, and so much more. See you guys there.